thing about this is every single member of Congress has an X account. They can record a video with their phone and talk about how they individually are against all of this outrageous spending. But it's the ex-owner who says that if they ultimately go along with a bill like this, he is going to bankroll a primary against them. It makes Elon Musk the center of the universe on Capitol Hill in a way that nobody has ever seen. I get that we always have, every Christmas time, we have these government shutdown fights, and usually they just complain about it and then vote for it anyway. But there has never been an unelected official like Elon Musk at the center of it like this.
These clowns, these absolute congressional clowns on Capitol Hill, they literally have no idea what's happening, but you will. We're going to cut through all the nonsense and see what's really going on with this looming government shutdown and what it all means for the new Trump administration and beyond. You're going to absolutely love this.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President, thank you. Donald, congratulations.
Thank you.
And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
good.
Welcome back.
Gang, what you just saw there was both the president and the vice president eerily congratulating Trump and promising a peaceful transition of power. Well, that's something I'd like to believe, but it's hard to believe those words when they're coming from the mouths of pure serial liars. I mean, career liars. So what does that mean for the next few months? The opposite of what they're promising. So absolute chaos. Economically, culturally, politically. We might be in for war for all we know. So what should you do? You should at least own some gold. The markets might be up right now, but who knows what's going to happen between now and January. You need to protect yourself against the last hurrah of the worst administration America has ever had. We know it's coming. I don't know what, but something is between now and January 20th. You might think they're just going to hand over a pristine, happy, functioning country to the man they tried to assassinate and put in jail, entirely ruin. No, something's coming, and you need to be financially prepared for it. You need to talk to Goldco and protect yourself against this last battle. Get some gold in your portfolio. In the coming months, you'll be glad that you did. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code and just chat with them. You'll be glad that you did. We need to talk about what's really going on in D.C. right now, because I think there's a lot of confusion surrounding this. As you know, the second CR went down in flames yesterday, thanks to 38 Republicans. This was technically the second continuing resolution. The first was just a pork-filled omnibus spending spree that Congress gets itself with every Christmas, replete with voting for themselves a big pay raise. But the difference this year is that we caught them. We caught them in the act. We caught them with their hand in the proverbial cookie jar. And we got Elon Musk, as you heard there, largely to thank for that. He mobilized his ex-army of tens of millions of patriots who flooded the phone lines and the text messages and the emails of the congressional representatives and told them in no uncertain terms to kill that bill. Kill that bill or face an immediate primary opponent. And lo and behold, they did. And in its place, there was a relatively clean CR. It shrank from 1,500 pages to just over 100. It's online. You can read it yourself. And of course, right on cue, because this is what Republicans do, right on cue, the congressional Republicans killed it. 38 bitter, angry, resentful, constituent-despising Republicans voted against it, even though President Trump gave his support to it. And now it looks like the government is about to shut down, which frankly, I'll be delighted over. I could care less. Shut it down. 15 days to slow the spend, as I've heard it put. Put the government under its own lockdown for a while. That sounds great to me. Now, that's exactly what President Trump is saying, right? If there's going to be a shutdown, then heck, let it happen now. Let it happen under Biden, under the senile excuse for an administration, and then we'll fix it come January 20th. Here's Scott Jennings reminding CNN that the failure of this resolution does not lie with those who are not even in power as of yet. Check this out.
Squarely on Elon Musk first and foremost, and Trump after that, and that would be the timeline of how this played out. What do you say to her?
Well, she let the mask slip right at the end. She said, "Who's the president right now?" I mean, who's the president-elect? But she asked the right question first. Who is the president right now? Joe Biden, who we rarely hear from, and the Wall Street Journal reported today, has been diminished for the last 4 years, and we've had unelected people running around running the federal government, apparently. So if that is what they're worried about, if they're worried about people who aren't Donald Trump, running the government or having influence, I wonder where they've been the last 4 years. Now, this doesn't excuse anybody's behavior on Capitol Hill tonight, but I think it's pretty rich for Democrats to be worried about people who aren't Donald Trump having influence when the current president, a Democrat, is AWOL and apparently not able to execute the duties of the office.
Now, in line with that, obviously there's a lot of finger pointing, a lot of grandstanding, all kinds of blame games going around. This morning, I really want to cut through all of that. I think that's all a bunch of noise, as what does Steve Bannon say? That's noise, not signal. We're going with signal here. Because I do think we are seeing something emerge here that's far more profound than the ridiculous politics surrounding a continuing resolution. I think that's just a symptom. I think we're seeing nothing less than the emergence of a new politics happening right before our very eyes that will, mark this down, write this down, this day, right? What are we? December 20th, just 5 days away from the big day, my favorite day of the year. I believe we are seeing right now a new politics emerge that will indeed change politics for the foreseeable future. And I want to show you that step by step in terms of how this CR fiasco has been playing out. I want to show you step by step how we really are witnessing the rise of a new politics that will indeed change the way we are governed for the foreseeable future. And you're right at the heart of that. To really understand this profound new politics, I think we first have to understand how this CR, or both these CRs, these continuing resolutions, particularly the original Porculus one, how they both point to a perennial problem inside the Republican Party. And it's a perennial problem both Trump and Musk are well aware of. And it's one that I believe that the new politics that's rising will indeed finally resolve. So what do I mean about this perennial problem? I came across a very insightful tweet that I think really spells it out quite nicely. It gets to the heart of the Republicans' dysfunctionality. It's a long tweet, so I'll summarize it for you. The fundamental difference between Republicans and Democrats, and there is one, there is clearly a difference, maybe not the one you think, but the fundamental difference between Republicans and Democrats is that the Democrats are entirely aligned between their leadership and their grassroots, their leadership and their voters. Both the Democrat leadership and the Democrat voter want more spending and more government. The question now is simply, how much can you get? You got to get that. Both the Democrat leadership and their voters want more government and more spending. And here's the key, there is never a disagreement over that ever. The only disagreements come from, how much can they go for? Who can they put in that'll give them the best and the most they can hope for, that kind of stuff. But for the Republicans, there's a radical discrepancy between their leadership and their grassroots, a very noticeable gap or divide. The grassroots wants less government and less spending. The grassroots is all for shutting down this freaking government. The grassroots are demanding that their leaders cut spending, shrink government, and to be fair, To be fair, perhaps slightly more than half of the Republican leadership, like Rand Paul, for example, is all for that. But a good 40% of Republican leaders want nothing to do with that. To be sure, they're all for cutting and gutting Democrat pet projects. Sure, no problem. And you'll see them featured on Sean Hannity all the time talking about that. But then, when you're not looking, they continue to want to fund to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars their own pet projects, of their own donors, of their own supporters and the like the military-industrial complex or Ukraine or cheap labor for their donors and so on. They're lobbyists. And so you can immediately see right there the quagmire that Speaker Mike Johnson is in. To be completely forthright and honest, I am no fan of. I am no fan of Johnson. But at the very least, you could see the impossible job he has. He has to navigate crossing a stream where the current is running in both directions. That's how this tweet put it. I thought that was brilliant. He has to navigate crossing a stream where the current runs in both directions. I think that's so key to understanding the dysfunctionality inherent in congressional Republicans. Mike Johnson needs 218 votes to pass anything. He does not have 218 votes from members who all agree to make cuts in spending. That number, according to this tweet again, is probably more like 180 on a good day. Right? I think he's being generous, but we'll give it to him. So how does Johnson get from 180 votes to 218? All right. Interestingly enough, isn't that 38? Again, this is from that tweet, which is very, very interesting. Am I doing my math right correctly? I think 180 out of 218, doesn't that equal 38? Interesting, right? Well, he needs 218 to pass. So how does he get from the 180 to 218? Well, he has to make deals with those 38s, those appropriators who want to spend more. But as he lines up those deals to get those votes, he ends up losing more and more votes from the more diehard spending cuts advocates. So again, as this tweet recognizes brilliantly, it's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste with openings on both ends. By contrast, the Democrats never have this problem. Never. Because there are never any members of Democrats objecting to spending more. And the cherry on top is spending more is how you buy the votes you need. So they have all the wind in their back in the current logic of D.C., in the current politics of D.C., all the wind is at the back of the Democrats, and the Republicans are totally divided. And so regardless of all the other issues that Republicans have or the various dynamics behind the failure of this vote last night, I think that this meta dynamic explains so much for why the GOP, particularly the congressional Republicans, are so pathetically dysfunctional. They have a discrepancy between their leadership and their grassroots that the Democrats simply don't have. Everyone in the Democrat Party wants to spend more, whereas the Republican grassroots wants to cut spending, all the while half their leadership wants to increase it for their donors and their lobbyists. And that's how you get this massive rift between, Republican voters and Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and John Cornyn. But, and this is where things get very, very, very interesting. This perennial problem of this radical discrepancy between the conflicting values of the Republican voter and the Republican politician points to an even bigger divide, doesn't it? That's actually just a microcosm of a much larger discrepancy, a much larger divide. What does this perennial problem inherent in the Republican Party ultimately point to? What's the real divide? Well, all you have to do is recognize how so many Republican leaders actually try to exploit this discrepancy between themselves and their own voters to their own benefit. So, for example, Rogan O'Hanley over at DC Drano, he brilliantly pointed out that all these big, brave Republicans pretending to be fiscal hawks today, for defending, voting against Trump's slim down CR, you'll notice they were all so quiet like little lambs yesterday when the deep state pork-filled omnibus was on the floor. Isn't that interesting? So as long as you're not paying any attention, they'll spend. They'll raise this sham we call a debt limit, debt ceiling that no one abides by, but they use it as a pawn. When you're not paying attention, they'll spend like drunken sailors, but then strip them of that spending and they'll vote against any other bill or any other CR in the name of fiscal responsibility. Because you supposedly as a voter want that. I mean, we don't call these guys swamp rats for nothing. But this is what Mike Cernovich pointed out. He just brilliantly, again, Congress always, he does this in all caps. Congress always raises the debt ceiling. There's never been a time it hasn't. Always. It doesn't matter if Republicans are in charge or Democrats are in charge. It doesn't matter. The debt ceiling is nothing more than a gimmick that self-branded fiscal conservatives, principled conservatives can hide behind when they have to vote on a bill that doesn't send money their way, that doesn't send money to their wars, that doesn't send money to their lobbyists, doesn't send money to their donors. Well, then they cloak that self-interest behind the veneer of fiscal conservatism. That's when they exploit their constituents' fiscal conservatism to their own advantage, even though they will literally sell those principles out in the next CR. So these are the games they play. They become masters of deception, or better, they were masters of deception. Unfortunately for them, they're only deceiving themselves. They ain't deceiving any one of us anymore. And again, we largely have Elon Musk to thank for that, for shedding much needed light on the perennial problem of the Republican Party, this fundamental discrepancy between their voters and their politicians, but even more importantly, his proposed solution. How do we ultimately resolve this discrepancy? Elon Musk said it himself. Any Republican that votes against the MAGA agenda will be primaried in 2026, period, end of discussion. He doesn't care if he has to primary the entire party. Any Republican that votes against the MAGA agenda will be primaried in 2026. They will be gone in 2 years, period, end of discussion. Now, specifically, he was referring to any Republican who voted for that porculus monstrosity. They were going to be out in 2 years. But that threat stands regardless. Any Republican who votes against the MAGA agenda, who votes against Trump's cabinet picks, who votes against Doge, is going to be facing a primary challenger funded, at least in part, by the richest man on the planet, whose net worth, by the way, just exceeded $400 billion. He can take care of congressional races. It's not a problem. Throwing $1 billion into congressional races is a walk in the park for this guy.